This is our makeup class while I'm actually away at a conference, and it's actually looking today at social media and how to promote your site. For assignment 3, one of the things you're asked to do is to outline a plan to promote your site. As we've discussed, there's a lot of content on the internet these days. We're all in information overload. So to make your site work, you not only just have to think about, well, how am I going to do to make it unique? You also think about how to let people know about it and get interested in it and start to engage with it and build a community around it. As we'll see today, there's a real emphasis about relationships and conversations these days, not just promotion. You don't necessarily have to enact this plan. In fact, it's completely up to you if you even publish a site, as we've discussed. However, I do need you to demonstrate some knowledge of these skills. So today's lecture is looking at social media marketing, things like network influence, what that means in terms of this strange mix of marketing and content and relationship and intimacy that's developing in this very hybrid space, and the digital divide and what that means in this context. So we'll start there. Now, you might think of the digital divide as the gap between those who do and those who do not have access to computers and the internet. That's traditionally what it might mean, but as is pointed out here, it's not just a technological problem, it's a social and political issue as well, because access is not just about having the equipment, it's about knowing how to use it and how to be confident connecting with others and influencing others, having access to a variety of tools, this tool set really, and the skills and the time to put them into practice. So this is a digital divide, and it's an important one because without those elements, people can get cut off from a conversation that's happening. Traditionally, you might think of the digital divide being a global issue, and certainly in poorer countries in the world, not everybody has a laptop or a MacBook. And sometimes it's whole families might be sharing a mobile phone. Although the mobile phone has been a great equaliser, it's given a lot of people access to the internet who otherwise wouldn't have had access. And also managed to curtail low corruption in the meantime, by the way, because rather than having to go through a public official, they've been able to go online and make applications. So that's been a real game changer there. It's also happening domestically too. And one of the things we're going to be looking at, and also when I come back as well, is what's happening with women. And I'm being generalist here. I'm generalising because there are obviously great computer programmers who are females and game designers who are females and engineers who are females. But in general, women aren't being drawn into these industries, and as a result, not only them, but society is suffering. And why is it suffering? Well, it's suffering because it's got mainly one dominant gender influence in the design of those applications. So, for instance, in computer games, there's a lot of emphasis on battle play and competition, whereas women, as a result of that, are tending to really flock towards the social media platforms. And there are also, as I want to emphasise, there are a lot of women who are on battle play and a lot of men on social media platforms, but there is also developing this gender divide in the applications that are available. And I think that socially that's an issue. But also those are the positions that are actually generally really well paid. There's a lot of work out there. I was talking to I was at a meetup in Manchester, and this mobile programmer was complaining because all of these human resources officers kept lying through the receptionist to try and get through to him, to try and headhunt him. Like one day he was being hassled by about 3 or 4 of them, all trying to up the offer on the payment. So that's probably one extreme end, but it's also all through in terms of business promotion, self-promotion, and general communication skills. This series is on your reading list to ask you to have a look at it before we come back, and I really encourage you to do that. It's a 2-part series that was on the BBC. It's a reality show where they take a group of girls who at the start are pretty much just all about Instagram and introduce them to coding, and they transform. So this raises interesting questions about whether this divide is a nature or nurture issue, but it also shows that it's possible to have a different world. And so one of the things we're going to do when I get back is think about, well, let's workshop. What can we do? This is a situation that's worrying. What sort of program can be done or strategies can be done to change the world? Really change the world. So here, this is an interesting thing, just on this other thing on what is social network influence. Now, this was sent to me, it just came in an email from like Digital Book World in my inbox one day, because I'm interested in writing. And I was reading it through, and it looks like an informational piece, an editorial and a guidance. And it says, many authors we talk to, they simply cannot afford to hire an assistant. But if you're immersing yourself in audience research, advanced review team coordination, managing contests, multi-author promotions, posting on social media, formatting your own manuscripts, managing street teams, managing an email marketing system, fact-checking, research, blog and podcast tours, ebook uploading, distribution, media kits, proofreading, editing, email correspondence, and website content management, you are just doing the bare bones. Oops, we forgot writing. And it was an advertorial. They were selling themselves as assistants, which, by the way, is a growing area. And a lot of writers start out getting work in social media and can get paid quite well as social media marketers. But increasingly, look at it. These days, as a writer, publishers will be looking to commission writers who are doing all of these things as well and have a social media presence. And it can seem really overwhelming and too much. Audience research, team coordination, posting, blogs, podcasts. And now they've written it in that way to make it seem overwhelming because I want you to think about getting an assistant. But it is an interesting point that ideally for all of us, these aren't so overwhelming. They're just increasingly part of the literacy and part of what you can do, although you don't always have to, and you can hopefully do it in your own terms. One thing I hope you are doing is just keeping an eye on your online reputation. Just personally, I don't know, have you ever been Googled? That's always very interesting. And it's just interesting that it's a verb these days. Googled. I Googled you. That's happened to me. Someone from years and years ago Googled me. It was really quite disconcerting the first time it happened. I don't know if you've done a Google search of your name or you do it regularly, but you can actually set up a Google alert. And it's also worthwhile also searching your name in Google Images, by the way, because there can be some awful photos turn up. This is a link to a alert set page, and all you have to do is just type in whatever, your name, and then create an alert. And any time that something is posted on that theme, you will get that sent to your Gmail inbox. So that's a handy thing for a start. So your business name, your personal name, just to keep an eye on what's being said about you so you can respond if need be. Now here's a question. If you're a government official, what would you do to interact with your public? How would you run an election campaign? How would you run a political campaign? Which platforms will be the most effective for you? Which ones are you best targeting? Where do you network as a government official? I'll give you just a second to think about that. Normally we discuss this in class, but just think about that for now. Think about which ones you've seen featuring in previous campaigns. I'm not sure if you've heard of this term, citizen co-production. Increasingly, because of these technologies, not only are media broadcasts a two-way conversation rather than a one-way broadcast as they used to be. It used to be that, the TV station broadcast to thousands and that was it. And now there's all these niche audiences developing on YouTube and conversations between them. So increasingly that's happening with government too. People are being invited to and increasingly expecting to engage. So government social media management requires the introduction of a new organisational role in charge of updating information on social media pages, monitoring interactions on these platforms, and extracting useful comments to be used inside local administrations. So this is an important part of government. It is the public sphere as much as any campaign meeting. What's being said online is the public sphere. And in this area of citizen co-production, ideally, this sort of conversation will help to improve government-citizen relationships and increase trust because people are communicating. Things that you might hear about are consultations, such as change.gov, which invited citizens to set the agenda for the Obama presidency. If you'd have heard of that, that would have been unheard of 20 years ago. And there have been electronic petitions. You may have signed one. You may have been sent one on your social media networks and signed one. And they're happening worldwide. And there are some in England and Scotland that allow citizens to bring bills to vote in Parliament. And political parties in Sweden, some people are bound by the results of online polls. So this is a political arena. At the same time, citizens are reporting and monitoring crimes. And they're also keeping an eye on public works. And there's data mining, continual data mining, which is potentially quite invasive, but also at the same time does allow government to deliver more personalised and more relevant information on neighbourhoods and health. So it can be put to good use. So this is this way that government is changing as a result of these digital initiatives. But this is, of course, the big platform for a lot of political discussion. The platform that everyone thought was just about people posting about what they had for breakfast ended up being a really key avenue and platform for political electioneering. Why? Well, it's easy and it's short, so it's not like you're going to have to listen to someone's diatribe or someone talking for hours and hours. And it's asymmetric, and what that means is if you follow someone or if you have someone follows you, you don't have to follow them. You can actually broadcast to thousands, and some people do. And every time you tweet, those tweets can be retweeted and linked and shared. So in terms of getting your opinions and your thinking out there, Twitter is a really good conceptual avenue and a conversational avenue. It's quite volatile at times. And it's interesting when you see people like Trump because they're kind of like shock jocks on Twitter. It is an important public conversational address system. As we saw at the start, those politicians who use Twitter are more likely to win. But it's not just about using it. It's about having the number of followers and actually have each tweet go further, be heard by more people, and maximise the potential benefits. And as we look, that is a digital divide because that takes time, and sometimes that takes training. And often, I can tell you now, it wouldn't have necessarily been Obama doing all his tweets. It would have been a team of people helping him with his social media presence. But nevertheless, because of this and because people are realising the importance of this, understanding how to increase social media influence and reach is big business because it can make a big difference to a business. This is a link to, and there are lots and lots of articles online in terms of what you can do. And this is a whole lot of an analysis about which ones tend to get engaged with. So they're looking at what is reach. So it's saying, try different experiments, try different posts and different lengths of posts. See what else gets retweeted and engaged with. And I actually encourage you to do that. Think when you're looking at, I know a lot of you are on Facebook, those who are, while you're going online, look at the ones that have the most comments or the most likes and think, what is it about those posts that get those mass response? Is it simply because those people are engaging? It could be. There's the principle of reciprocity, which is really important. But it could also be that they're starting a provocative conversation in some ways. Maybe they're making sure that they engage with comments in a very affable way. They're not being too provocative in the comments, but they're actually responding to any comments that they get. Look at all of these things. like these are strategies that some people say if you mention really someone who's got a lot of followers, they're likely to retweet you, which will introduce you to a whole new audience base. People have strategized these things, adding photos and videos to make it really effective. So I'll let you look at this in your own time, because there's all sorts of different strategies, but eye-catching images, interesting, funny tags, and engagement are really important principles in general. And in line with that, there's been this other phenomenon that's happened, which is viral media. And virality really just means that something spreads very quickly like a virus. That's why they call it viral media. And it's not necessarily the same sort of principles as what used to sell newspapers or what used to make it onto the news. Viral media that is shared very quickly and very popular tends to be more light-hearted or quirky. But as we have seen with some viral campaigns, and I'll introduce you to a few that you might remember, they can also be very effective. But what sort of... so with Twitter, you're talking about getting information out there and keeping people up to date. It's very much real time and fast. But what about building relationships? Facebook is another one. YouTube, actually. Has anyone remember this guy, the Old Spice guy? This is a really famous... This was a campaign. It's quite funny. I hope this works. This was such an effective campaign that it actually inspired a lot of people to try and do something very similar. I'm having a bit of a problem here. Let me just see. No, it's all working. Should be fine. Here we go. Let's have a look.
Hello, ladies. How are you? Fantastic. Does your man look like me? No. Can he smell like me? Yes. Should he use Old Spice body wash? I don't know. Do you like the smell of adventure? Do you want a man who smells like he can bake you a gourmet cake in the dream kitchen he built for you with his own hands? Of course we do. Swan dive into the best night of your life. So, ladies, should your man smell like an Old Spice man? You tell me.
And they just started a sensation. It just got a lot of attention on social media, and they would do things. People would say, "Can you do this for my girlfriend? I want to invite, to ask her to marry me." And he'd respond. So it was happening in real time, and they were developing up a conversation. But it was very quirky and unique. And we've started to see some of these things in the videos that you yourselves were sharing on the discussion board, looking for the principles. What made that shareable? And you can see some of them were about relevance and having a real emotional impact. But also humour was really big, which this is often thing, and being quirky. But those not necessarily big. It's about everyday quirkiness. And in-jokes, that's got a lot of in-jokes in it. Aren't said, but that are intimated. So a lot of people have studied what makes something go viral, because if you very easily make a normal video production and it goes viral, it's had this huge influence all of a sudden. You haven't had to pay for all this advertising. It's just gone there. Now, it's not always easy to make a viral media on demand, but it is something that people try to do, a bit like the Holy Grail. And YouTube has become the platform where a lot of people actually will do that. If you're interested in YouTube, I do recommend the reading in the readings about it, in the readings folder. It's a very good article which does a study of the whole culture of YouTube and the sorts of media that it has really, when I say privileged, I mean championed and nurtured and highlighted, really sort of brought up into the fore. So the developers of YouTube just started with this idea. They just wanted to know, well, again, it's creative problem solving. How do we share video online with friends? And there were just a couple of guys, and they just, like Snapchat saw the issue with Facebook being that you had these images left online forever. These guys said, well, we just want to share video. And we just want to do it amongst, it's very domestic. And in the process, they figured something out that other people were trying to, which is that it's not about the video. It's about creating a community around the video. This is what a market analyst has said. Now, ideally, it created a video, but let's have a look at this. I don't know if you've seen this.
R.I.P. Nelson Mandela. You were a great actor, and Bruce Almighty is my favorite ever film. And I think you were what God is actually like.
Please tell me you are trolling and are not serious.
People deal with grief differently.
You clearly deal differently. So differently, you're actually retarded.
Go away. Have respect before you spread hate on the legacy. And think before you use hateful language.
No, but seriously, do you not realize yet?
Can you stop?
Do you not know how completely mentally retarded you are being right now?
Okay, I'll stop that. I should have maybe made a warning that about it had some disturbing language in it. That is actually a couple who are some theatre actors who do reenactments of YouTube commentary wars, and they're very, very funny. And it just highlights how ugly those places can get at sometimes. Whether that's because they're really popular with young viewers, who knows? It's on the one hand, there's this community. On the other hand, it's a pretty chaotic and unformed community. But nevertheless, this is a cultural place, and it's not necessarily about serious policy. It's about something else entirely. YouTube. So why YouTube, and why did this become so popular? Well, it's easy. You just have to press play. You don't have to join. You don't have to download any plugins, and it should generally, ideally, I'm sure we've all seen the buffer wheel go round, round, round while we're waiting for the video to load, but generally it's quick start and it just plays. And if there are any subtitles, it's not too hard to find them. And it's vast. There's a lot being uploaded, and generally it's the one you go to, more so than Vimeo or other online libraries. And it's had a very big influence. It's really changed what people think of as quality media, and changed and challenged the professional standards of media. Because it used to be that, to actually make a broadcast or make a show, you were expected to have had years as a cinematographer, learning how to operate a camera, and, you'd studied films and you knew how to put things together. And then this thing came up that was just people at home with their handy cams making very rough, raw footage sometimes. And it became hugely popular. So non-narrative seriality, that meant there wasn't so much a story between things, so it was very episodic. And because people would come back to them just at whenever, they weren't watching it according to a schedule of a TV. And the culture of the clip, people sharing clips online, became very important. So that form of the clip really rose to prominence. And quick gratification, so not longer shows, not long series. People had to know the point pretty sick, or get to the gag pretty quickly. And there has been this process, this practice, even though they do officially limit copyright. A lot of people will upload a copyright infringement, knowing that it's going to get blocked, but then tell everyone to get there quickly before it does. It's become a place where a lot of activists will upload materials and can do so, and it's created its new format, its new aesthetic, and its new standards of popularity known as the YouTuber culture. And this is in that reading from Hildebrand. In the culture of the clip, spectacle, stunts, cuteness, pop culture references, and exhibition all trump narrative. So it's tempting to suggest that user generation on YouTube is more about promoting oneself than about exchanging ideas with others, and that well be true. This idea of self-promotion drives it as much as the idea of wanting to communicate ideas, more so than necessarily communicating ideas so much as expressing self and sharing self-presentation. Self-presentation becomes an art form in itself and a practice of engagement, and yet it's still networking and it's still community. But here are some great moments in YouTube history, and he lists a lot of these examples in that reading. I'll show you a couple. You may be familiar with some of them. Evolution of dance. These became viral. I'll let you see that in your own time. I'll show you another one here. Oh, no, this one you must remember. Now, this was about the prosumer aesthetic, it's called now. Prosumer is like a shorthand for professional consumers, professional amateurs. And this is a band who hired professional video makers to make a video clip that looked like it had been made in a home garage, because that was so much the dominant and trendy form. And because that became such a popular clip that was shared a lot, because it was quirky and fun and inventive, it really made the career of that band. Here's another one I want you to have a look at.
Hi guys, so this is my first video blog. I've been watching for a while and I really like a lot of you guys on. I really like pay to the order of two. You're really funny, and your videos are always really interesting. You seem really nice. And then there's the wine cone, or just wine cone, I'm not sure. You are totally retarded, but I like it. Well, I guess a video blog is about me. My name is Bree. I'm 16. I don't really want to tell you where I live because you could like stalk me. Yeah. Well, what you need to know about my town is that it's really boring. Like really boring. That's probably why I spend so much time on my computer. I'm a dork. I didn't really have a plan for this video blog, but I guess I'll just do this. I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that.
So, Lonely Girl 15 became a sensation. Did you pick if it was real or not? If you were wondering why it was so beautifully lit and how the quality of the video was as good as it was, and why she seemed so perfectly made up, you were probably picking that this was actually a construction and she is actually an actress. And at first there was a lot of, scandal about whether it was real or not, but when they confessed and said, no, it's not, we actually made this up, it was still so popular. People didn't really mind. They were still happy to watch the series. So it's interesting, again, this blur between reality and performance is not always as clear cut, and maybe not necessarily always as important, because the the line of, we've discussed, are we always performing anyway? But when they came out and said, well, it was just like another drama video. I'll let you see, there's a lot of other versions here, classic moments in YouTube history. These are important elements of today's cultural knowledge. But out of that has grown this practice as well that's also emerged out of YouTube, which is called the micro-celebrity, because there are people making quite a lot of money by doing regular vlogs. And I apparently have used that term before and someone wasn't familiar with it, but it's a video blogger. And it's quite widespread practice where people will actually study this semi-professionally. This woman, she's one of the highest paid YouTubers found on Forbes list. And they can actually get quite a lot of money. Certainly a living.
Hey guys, it's Ro. Today I'm hanging out with Miranda. I am so excited. I'm so excited. This is the first time that we've done a video together, and we also did a video over on her channel.
We are celebrating because season 2 of Haters Back Off comes out October 20th on Netflix.
I didn't do first.
I'll let you see that in your own time.
Thank you.
But you can see it's quite polished. And it looks like a quite professional channel, and she is. She's working, this is her professional, but she set it up on her own YouTube channel. And let's just see how much she gets. Okay. I'll actually have a look at that and put that on the VLE for you when this comes out, so you should know. But it's not an insubstantial figure. This is one of my favourites, however, and this lady also makes her living on YouTube. So there's all different types of micro-celebrities. They're not all glossy.
I've been building robots for 2 years now, and I think what I really like about them is just that they're very easy to control. That makes me sound like a terrible person. The reason I started building robots was because I actually wanted to automate some parts of my life, but then I kind of realized that the over-the-top solutions were way more fun to build than the actually useful solutions, so I just kind of went with that. A lot of people think that I'm an engineer, but I'm actually not. And that's actually one of the things that I really want to tell people, that you don't need to be an engineer to be an inventor. My favorite project that I've ever built is probably my latest one, which is an applause machine. It just always makes you feel so appreciated.
Now, Simone is also sponsored and has quite a following, as you can imagine, on YouTube. Oh, that didn't stop. Hang on a second. It's going to start again, so I'll just stop that. Yeah, so I really like her videos, and there are a few people I do like on YouTube who've got interesting, you know, they're quite down-to-earth characters, and they're just doing really interesting things. So there are different types of celebrities, just there are different types of celebrities on channels, normal television stations and radio stations, but these are people who have done it and created themselves independently, and actually as a result they've got a lot of influence, and they actually can make a living out of it and get sponsors and you know, money to wear certain clothes and things like that. So these are interesting tools that are changing industries, changing governments, changing business. And it's really important for you and useful for you to think about how you can use it as well. So things that you could possibly do are thinking about using it as a Twitter campaign, or are you going to make some interesting YouTube content perhaps? And perhaps thinking about what the type of media that's popular on your platform, and studying the platform for a while, like, as we said, looking at Facebook and thinking about which ones get the most comments and which don't, or which videos on YouTube get shared. You can have a look at the ones that you yourself shared on the discussion board. These are some other things, some case studies, and we were looking at those. This is one Well, we'll talk about, do these actually link? Okay, well, I'll have a look and see if I can just take you there myself. And this is again looking at this interesting area where it may be an ad, but it's so creative and becomes interesting content that people watch it anyway. This is a series that was actually only broadcast on social media, and it was designed that way, and it's paid for by product placement. So you could see there's all these tech products that these Hollywood kids are using, and it's basically a reality series that's broadcast on Tumblr and Twitter.
People an eye into self-identity.
I don't speak out when people are mean to me.
Be myself, do the things I normally do, skate, make art.
I want to show who I really am.
This summer,
So for your business, you don't necessarily have to make, although a lot of people do make materials, but you can also, keep an eye out what's out there and share it, and have yours, develop up. As we talked about, people who are in the know in a field can get a following just because people like to follow them to find out what is out there because they've got an eye on to what's happening. This was another one. This was that was done. It was like an alternate reality game. An alternate reality game is a puzzle that people who are watching it as the audience have to collaborate to try and solve, and the little clues will be sprinkled throughout the media. Like a famous one was a credit for a movie poster that said robot therapist, and people went, it was just put there in the credits of this movie poster, and people went, what? A robot therapist? Robots don't need therapists. And so they started to search for that person's name, and that led to a fake website, which led to a whole trail of other fake websites that were set in the future. So it was suddenly like this extraordinary thing was happening in real life, but an alternative real life, because it was kind of there and wasn't, because it was set in the future. And that's become what's known as an alternate reality game. And this is another example of one.
It's a new idea, and it's a way to sort of make the viewer of the film sort of participant in the film. I think that's something that was really exciting for me.
Christina's a young woman. She's super busy in the rat race of life, and the story kind of makes her reevaluate who her real friends are, and it really pushes her to her limits.
Suddenly, she wakes up one day and she's trapped in a room. She doesn't remember how she got here, and every once in a while, whoever is holding her allows her to have some internet access, and so she's using social media to get out there.
This is the story of Inside, Hollywood's first social film. Intel and Toshiba wanted to become relevant to a younger audience, a generation that sees computers not only as tools, but as entertainment machines where they can watch movies, play games, and interact with their friends. So we created a new genre of entertainment that blurred the lines between gaming, social media, and Hollywood movies. This was social film, and our first social film was called Inside. On July 25th, 2011, we released Inside Day 1, a 6.5-minute film that introduced Christina Parasso to the world. Over the course of the next 11 days, her story would unfold in real time through a combination of 8 filmed episodes and live interactions between the audience, Christina, and secondary characters via Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The audience quickly realized that Christina's captor wasn't just putting her to the test, as puzzles and ciphers began popping up all over the place, both in the films and online. Some fans even went so far as to start blogs and help pages, all in hopes of solving these clues to save Christina Parasso. A social casting call gave one talented fan a highlighted cameo in episode 5.
The ketchup bottle? It has a date on it. I think it means something.
After nearly 2 weeks, and with the help of her new friends, Christina finally escaped near Los Angeles' Union Station, and a few lucky fans who followed the clues to her location were greeted by federal agents and filmed in interrogation scenes that were later shared with the Inside community. The film's garnered over
Now,
13 million.
I'm not expecting you to launch an alternate reality game, but to be aware that these forms are happening and they're an emerging genre and quite popular in some circumstances. And there we go. And okay, they might be promotion, but they're also very creative. So it's hard to necessarily argue for or against, but they're an interesting development, that's for sure. But they do raise a few questions about the appropriation of creativity and artistry in private space, which we will look at very shortly. But here's a wonderful example of people actually working and using social media in a really socially beneficial way, in a social justice way. And this was a project called Half the Sky. And these people really wanted to change the world. They wanted to change the status of women. Around the world, many of whom live very difficult lives. Here we go, I'll show you in this. And what they did with this was women in generally America in particular put a lot of money into this this social media campaign, and working with the way they made it. And what's so interesting about it is they actually worked with. They didn't just impose their own views about what women should be from afar. They actually worked with local communities on the ground and discovered that actually the issues for local women were about contraception and health. So they actually worked to change their lives of these women in that way. I'll just show you a little bit of an overview of this project.
Women and girls is absolutely essential to who we are as a people.
Issue of gender equality globally must be addressed if the problems that we share across the world are to be solved.
It's the way that we can bring greater peace and balance in this world.
We're at the point of freedom, and that means two things. One is it's maximum danger, and the other is we're not going to stop.
What Nick and Cheryl have been able to do is tell very compelling stories of people that they empathize with and understand in their context.
Well, I got an email. I remember like the subject being like Sierra Leone, and I opened that one because I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's that all about? And then it was the invitation to come on board, and I immediately said yes. I love what Nick and Cheryl say in the book, that women are not the problem, they're the solution.
When I started reading what Half the Sky is about and what the message is and the story.
You are so beautiful and so smart. I know you will be very successful.
You can't say no.
Maybe I shouldn't ask, but can I ask, did your husband ever hit you? No. So,
it goes down very high.
Nick and Cheryl kind of revolutionized the way people talk about aid and made people very fired up and inspired, and certainly made me want to get out there and be a part of the movement.
So you were a commercial sex worker from when to when?
From 1994 to 1980.
I'm just curious how much you were paid for that work.
50 shillings.
It's a tough topic. The challenge that women and girls face around the world is not an easy topic to talk about, but we really think it is the moral challenge of this century.
Nick and Cheryl are out there talking about this issue, and not just talking about it just theoretically, but they have all these stories about actual girls and women that are going through some of these struggles. That really...
I'll let you watch the rest of that in your own time. It is an inspiring project. And they had different approaches for different countries. For America, they had a lot of social media campaigns, and they actually made some video documentaries. But for India and in Africa, they actually instead they had some mobile games and mobile access to media, and it was all informative about healthcare and some things that they could do about contraception, but they were easy access and playful and fun games that were more likely to be of interest to the community that they were targeting and more likely to be reach the people that they wanted to reach. So this is a good example of how you can actually think and strategize how to even cross a digital divide with your strategy, with your promotional campaign. But yeah, interesting issues, as I said, that gets raised. I really liked this particular campaign. I don't know if anyone saw it. You used to be able to put your name on a Coke can or Coke bottle, and they'd also put it on a billboard and you could go and run and take a photo of your name on the Coke bottle, or share a Coke with friends and you'd share it on social media. And a lot of people feel that that's been highly criticised. It's very invasive of interpersonal relationships. It depends whether you think that's representative of times, and is it invasive or is it just a reflection of our culture? These are interesting and meaty issues, but they're not easy answers, and they're not necessarily black and white either. But just to point out that there are some questions around this merger and this hybridity as well. It raises a lot of opportunities as well as potential challenges. But as an overview, in this landscape, content and community are highlighted. It's not just about promotional ads. It's about being engaging, being social, being responsible, and being authentic. That's actually increasingly people prefer that, and a lot of kind of alternative heroes have emerged through that who are very down to earth and authentic and playful or fun, provocative, unexpected, unique, engaging. Have a look and see if those things are getting interest on Facebook or on social media platforms, are the ones that got shared and got comments. And think about, is there something that you can do like the Coke name on, like the name on the Coke label, to make people, so that if they share, they get something out of it. What do they get out of it by sharing and engaging with your particular campaign? Is it because you're giving them a funny piece of media to share, or a relevant or emotional, uplifting message to impart? Can they personalize it in some way? That's often very, very popular approach. Are you giving them a statement that's transformative? What are you doing that's actually they're going to get out of it by sharing it? It's often important to emphasize a service or information of interest to them, not just what you want to know, but thinking about what they want to know and what's useful to them. And for an example of personalization, I was talking about, as well as the Coke label, think of the ice bucket challenges. Everyone remember that viral hit of last summer where everyone threw buckets of ice water over themselves and videoed that happening and posted it to social media, and raised in the process, even though everyone said it was criticised at the time of being a supercilious campaign that had nothing to do with the issue, because it was so fun and so quirky and so easy for people to do, and it gave them a thrill, and it showed them publicly as doing something fun and playful, yet also valuable for the community. It raised enough money that it led to a medical breakthrough. So it's getting the network effect. How do you get that network effect? And is it important? Well, what do you think? Did that change the world? Now, I'm not saying it was, didn't have its issues. Some people said, it's traumatizing people who aren't ready to talk about it. And it's like trial by media. It's almost like a lynching campaign in some ways. But at the same time, it had an impact. And it really did challenge some attitudes and some old practices. I don't think necessarily people in Hollywood will be as freely inclined to approve or turn a blind eye to sexual harassment practices. But then what are the downsides of that? Does everyone remember Kony, 2012? Do you remember that campaign? It was very well done, and it was a guy who'd been to Africa and seen young child soldiers and the issue of child soldiers. I won't show you the whole thing because it goes for a long time. I'll show you a little bit just to jog your memory. Now, while that's playing, look over here what Kony didn't tell you. This actually was a huge viral hit because it was very emotive and it seemed very emotionally important, and it really put a call to people to act. It didn't just put the issue out, it actually charged people emotionally and then asked them to do something, and that doing something
200 years ago
was to share the video. And so it generated enormous awareness about this issue, but then people said it really was very superficial and it wasn't actually dealing with a real problem. This guy who was talking about Kony wasn't even happening anymore, and we don't need people from America to talk about us, and we want to run our own show, and this was very simplistic. So there was a bit of a backlash because they're saying that, this is just clicktivism, not activism. But at the same time, as I said before, looking at the Ice Bucket Challenge, clicktivism can have a positive effect. It just needs to be really well solidly researched, which unfortunately Kony 2012 wasn't. So as I said, we will come back and workshop the issue of women in tech, and in the meantime, having a look at those YouTube videos that you all posted to the discussion board and thinking about which ones were shared and what are the characteristics of that. Having a look at Facebook, what gets liked, what gets shared, what aspects make a discussion in that forum successful or not. Are there any in-jokes? Does the time spent interacting with others affect the amount of interaction received in return? And what sort of conversational style? Because if you want to actually engage with people socially in a platform, you want to understand the culture, understand the language. How might you cross a digital divide in your project? So is there something that you can have on mobile, or is there something that you can actually get out to social media networks, or is it something that could be playful in some way? Or is it something that you might actually mix media with a lot of community meetings and involve meetups as well as actually things going out online? Do you want a really strong grassroots presence? So how are you going to cross the digital divide and access people who wouldn't necessarily normally access the typical campaign on Facebook or Twitter? And just as an overview of what's coming up in assignment 2 and 3, there will be a draft submission for the website. It needs to be done in class. It's really not worth having a look and talking about these things via email. It's much better to do it face-to-face, and it's going to be peer review in weeks 9 and 10. We'll devote time for everyone can show and share their blog or their site if they're comfortable and get feedback, or alternatively I'll come around privately and have a look and give some feedback. If you would like to have your draft copy for assignment 3 checked, you're welcome to send me a bullet point outline and sample paragraph by 5 p.m. Friday, November 24, and I will get that back to you in time for you to be able to make any adjustments before you submit on December the 8th.